Good evening and welcome to Getty's Live Talk. Hashtag Disruptive Education. I am Zainab Molai, Getty Trainer, your host for the live talk today. So, Global Education and Training Institute is one of the premium training institute in the country, and we have two types of trainings in Getty: Getty Pre-Service Training Program and Getty Post In-Service Training Program. And we also have this forum on which we do live talks, just with the purpose to disrupt education and provide platform to the educators, education leaders, and edupreneurs from around the country to come to our platform and discuss their innovative ideas. We are driven by the force to disrupt education, and we work under the broad vision of our founder director, Dr. Sunita Gandhi. So today we have a very interesting and very amazing guest with us today, Dr. Priyanka Behrani. She is presently an associate professor at the School of Business and Law, Navratna University, Vadodara. A very warm welcome to you, ma'am. Let me
Thank
go
you.
through your bio. She has worked with Department of Psychology, the MS University of Baroda, as an assistant professor for 14 years. She is a PhD in psychology in Enneagram from the MS University of Baroda. She is a registered psychologist with Rehabilitation Council of India. She comes with an overall work experience of more than 2 decades in assessment, counseling, teaching, and training and development. She's a certified in assessor skill training and in 16 PF from PSI UK. She has conducted national and regional academic workshops for professionals. She has attended over 40 international and national seminars and conferences and have 17 publications to her name. She has facilitated and assessed clients from various industries. As a trainer, she has been recognized for creating, stimulating, and interactive learning environment, encouraging participants and individual creativity. Once again, a very warm welcome to you, ma'am. And without much ado, I would hand over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Jenna, for such a warm introduction. Today's topic that I am supposed to talk about is related to communication, which we feel generally is a very very common thing. And communication में क्या सीखना है? We are well aware कि what is communication, and we know how to talk and we know how to go about it. But when we go into the details of how this lag in communication may lead to a lot of problems in our day to day lives, communication is the only way in which we can make ourselves expressive. This leads to a lot of positive interpersonal relationships. There have been cases in the past wherein people, because of wrong communication or miscommunication, there have been difficulties in the interpersonal relationships at workplaces, and that is where it leads to a lot of difficulties. So let us go ahead with. I have a small PowerPoint presentation which I will be able to present it. So, communication, as we just discussed, what is communication? It's basically a way to interact. Most of the times, communication is taken as something give and take. Of course, it is give and take, but it is more related to interaction. So, communication is not something that is one way. But what are the most common ways in generally in which we communicate? We have spoken words. We speak a lot. भगवान ने मुंह दिया तो हम बहुत बोलते हैं. We write, and nowadays written language has changed to written medium has changed to such a great extent after WhatsApp, after emailing. We have a lot of things that we generally we don't give importance to, that is para language, like pitch, like tone, like just being silent, the volume in which we speak, the rhythm in which we express, and last and the most important, the body language. So the way I gaze, the way I stand, the way I look, the way I use my hand gesture, body posture, all of things communicate even if we don't speak. There are few things which we need to keep in mind, which are very important for us when we're talking about communication. Everything we do is communication. Even if I am, for example, right now, I cannot see any of you who are listening to this, but I am very sure that I'm talking just because you're listening there. So everything we do is communicate. Even when we are silent, we are communicating. So that is sending a message to me that you are there to listen to my talk. The way we begin our message determines what is going to be the outcome of the message. So how we start the message, how we express ourselves, the beginning, in the beginning, will determine that how my communication is going to take place. And the way message is delivered always affects the way message is received. The most important thing, the underlining factor is the real communication is how not what you say, how it is received. So it is not the way message is intended. It is always the way message is received. Number of times it has happened that we may end up into miscommunication, and we keep on we have to apologize saying that I never intended that. But that doesn't matter, because the way you have expressed is going to be taken. Communication is always a two-way street. We have to give as well as gather. So starting with this few basics of communication, I will just quickly go through, which you're already aware of. What is communication? How do we understand it? So in communication, there is always a sender and there is a receiver. This sender has some message that the sender wants to pass it on to the receiver, and this message is put up and coded in a particular manner to be expressed. So it can be in the form of body language, like showing gestures, like expressing. You remember those times when our parents would just look at us and we knew that we have to be out or we have to be shut. So the way message is encoded through a particular medium of communication, and then that message is decoded by the person. And this communication doesn't get complete if there is no feedback analysis or there is no feedback required. And because this part of feedback missing in the process leads to the major miscommunication. And if you remember, go back so as teachers, we all have the tendency to ask after completing, am I clear? Did I made myself clear? Have you understood? The reason why the teacher says this thing again and again, because the teacher is expecting the feedback from the decoder, that the way message was intended is sent and received in exactly the same manner. But in all this process, there is lot of possibility that there can be miscommunication because of this noise. The noise can be at the encoder's end, it can be at the way message is framed, the way wrong medium of communication is chosen, or the way decoder has decoded. So if we want to understand communication and we analyze, so this particular concept gives us a lot of clarity about that how we as communicators have to be very clear that where or introspect that where I need to improvise, or where that importance has to be given depending upon what kind of communication we are into. So suppose if there is the number of times there is a possibility that I'm going to talk about few barriers which may lead to effective communication in any of these areas. So language barriers. I remember, I'm sure everybody has experienced that the way we talk has to be understood by the other person. कई बार ऐसा होता है that we may use lot of jargons because we are thorough with the language, but the other party may not be interested in, or the other party is not very clear on that language. So in that, and of course the language if I'm using. So when I first shifted to Gujarat, there was a lot of times when I would not be able to understand how and what people are talking. So I would tell them, can you please translate that in Hindi? Now, in that case, if as teachers, as professionals, as educators, it becomes really important that I understand that we teach in a particular medium. अंग्रेजी में पढ़ाते हैं, हिंदी में पढ़ाते हैं, गुजराती में पढ़ाते हैं, मराठी में पढ़ाते हैं. But most importantly, when the teacher has to understand what language does my student understands, So maybe if it is a protocol, I may not speak another language. But if my student has not understood in that language, it doesn't work. There are a lot of cultural barriers because the culture we belong to may change the way it is. I'll quickly give you a small example here that when we are talking about working in a multinational company or working in a particular state, the way we address people, like for example in Gujarat, when we address people, we have to add Bain and Bhai. Priyanka Bain, Vinod Bhai, this is how we generally address. Now, if I am not addressing the individual in another manner, or if I'm taking the first names of the people without using Bain and Bhai, people feel offended, though I never intended that. But the receiver has taken that way. Semantic barriers, the way things are understood is very different. The way we teach, the way we mean, and the way person takes. And there are a lot of perceptual distortions because the way we perceive things and the other people perceive things. Here, I'll give you a quick example here. Now, if we ask, there are a lot of perceptual differences here because the way I am perceiving it as poor, the other person may be perceiving it as wise. Similarly, the way I am talking may mean something different and the other person may take it differently. There are a lot of cultural barriers. This particular sign of OK in UK and US means money in Japan. It means zero in Russia, and in Brazil it is taken as an insult. I remember as a child when we used to do this, which means a thumbs up, go ahead, very nice. We would use that to put down the other person. So there are a lot of cultural differences which we need to keep in mind. Yes, the most importantly, specifically when me as a teacher have faced it, I'm sure most of us would have seen that the information has to be short so that it is taken in that manner. If we give lot of information, what to pick and choose becomes difficult for the listener. Using a wrong channel of communication has always been a bigger barrier. So there are a number of times, I'm sure, even this online teaching has made initially very difficult to feel comfortable with the students because we were comfortable with the students face to face, but now we have become comfortable. But still number of times you will feel कि मैथमेटिक्स तो मैं फेस टू फेस जितना अच्छा पढ़ा सकती हूँ उतना अच्छे से I may not be able to teach online. So what channel of communication have I to use, and in that choosing we may reduce the miscommunication. Now, as a teacher, as a professional, as a manager, number of times our status plays a significant role. Here, I'll quickly give you an example. If you go to the doctor and doctor tells you कि please MRI करा के आइए, you may not tell the doctor तुम पैसा खाते हो, because you will not say it because you trust the doctor's status. Even if you feel that there's something wrong in the process, you will not say that. So you have to keep, as a professional, we need to keep a profile in such a manner so that people feel comfortable talking to us. So status has always worked as a barrier. Remember those time when you have to go to your teacher and say something, you have to go to your parents and say something. Number of times the status on which they belong to may become a barrier. So we have to be really careful about these things. And most importantly, last but not the least, number of times I may not be interested in what the person is sharing. I am in my own world, and when the person is teaching, I'm in a different world. Today, after the pandemic, when students have come to the classes, we tell them to put down their phones. And once we ask them to put down their phones, we assume that student is going to take interest in what I am teaching. But number of times you will see them looking here and there, not able to pay attention to what we are saying. So maybe the way the data is processed is not creating that much of interest. So as teachers, it has become much more challenging to create that interest for the students. Number of times the distractions in the environment are barriers. For example, certain kind of noises outside, certain kind of body gesture of the student, but most importantly is internal distractions, our own internal distractions going on in the mind. And those internal distractions may become a barrier in which we are articulating our words, and at the same time it may also become a barrier when we are listening to our uh, stakeholders. Barriers from the sender may be when we use a large amount of words to convey messages, articulation difficulties, and assumptions is something. So we may assume a lot of things that people are aware of that, and then we get to know that person is not aware of that. So that is why feedback becomes very important. The way we start our conversation is very important. So, simple example, when we go to our classes, we ensure that the student, we check this, we revise what we studied yesterday. Because that, if we assume that student remembers what we talked yesterday and whatever we teach today may not be taken so well. There are a number of times the barriers from the receiver where they will not pay attention. They may not pay attention. They may listen inactively, and when you uh, so when they listen inactively, they may not, the sender may not be able to articulate well because the sender is also getting distracted in the process, and just with the half of the information we may jump to conclusions. The receiver may not ask the questions to make the clear to understand any point. So in that case, it becomes very important that the feedback has to be a two-way process. So if the receiver is not asking, it is the sender's responsibility to check, did you understand, did you get, am I making my point clear? Now, how do we get over these barriers? Few of the things which I already talked about. Connecting with the audience, we have to be very clear who my audience is. Are my audience belong to a particular strata, status, socioeconomic background, religion, culture? All those play a very significant role in if we want to make our communication very clear. Use as simple words as possible, because that is not the place to express how good or how effective, how strong my language is. It's all about the message has to be sent effectively. We have been at times listening to these memes wherein we talk about Shashi Tharoor for his English thing, because the way he speaks may not be understandable for a common man. So the purpose of passing those messages may not be clear a number of times. So make the language, keep the language as simple as possible so that people understand. Ensure the body and keep taking care of the body language, because number of times the body language that we use may lead to wrong, though it is not intended, but the message goes like, for example, you did not smile when I say that. So was I expected to smile, or was I not expected to smile? Body gestures, body postures, body tone in which we talk, we have to be culturally sensitive when we are dealing with any kind of communication, which we already talked about. And feedback, checking the understanding, and ensure that it is never a one way communication. It always has to be a two-way communication. And this two-way communication can be ensured only when there are effective questions. So, if I am interested in listening, if I am interested in what the sender is sending, I will genuinely ask questions because I'm interested and I am understanding. Communication gets completed only when the summarizing is done. So these are few ways in which we can ensure that the communication becomes more effective. So this is one part of communication. The second part of communication is non-verbal communication, of which I gave you the glimpse. So, what all are the non-verbal communication? We will start with this. I'm going to talk about a simple example: body posture. The way I am sitting. Am I sitting straight? Am I slouching? Am I putting a little? I'm going a little further. Now, for example, if I have gone for an interview, or if a professional, or if my employee, or if my student has come to me for a problem, and I'm crossing my legs and sitting, and I am sitting in a very, very stern tone, that becomes a barrier in communication, because the person who has approached you is clear that you are very authoritative, though that may not be the case. Appearance. So, the way I am wearing my clothes, the way I put on my shoes, the way I have presented myself in front of others is going to indicate how the communication is going to be. Head movements, nodding. So if you are in a place where you are having face to face communication, it the nodding gives us an example that yes, you are listening. This gives the feedback that you are understanding. And I'm sure many of the teachers who are present here can relate to this, that during pandemic, when we were teaching online, and many teachers are still teaching online. So when we are teaching online, it because we are not getting the feedback from the students, number of times it becomes monotonous, and it becomes very, very difficult to, because it looks more like a one way communication. Hand movements, the way hands are moving. So too much of hand movements may lead to distractions. So we have to be careful about how my hands are moving. Eye movements, too much of winking. So just quick example. So if I am talking to you, if someone is talking to you and simultaneously looking sideways somewhere, so in this way, there is lot of possibility that it may send wrong kind of signals. Facial expressions, yes. Remember the facial expression of your parents when you did something that was not very acceptable to them. Body contact. So now coming to this one, which is really very important. So when we are shaking hands, so, if I'm talking from the Indian culture point of view, many people may not be comfortable with the body contact or greeting people through shaking hands. So, if you can read the body language of the person much beforehand, you may avoid shaking hands. And luckily or luckily with Indian culture, we have a very nice way of greeting wherein we may just fold hands and say namaste. So if you are shaking hands, ensure that you are comfortable about it, and the other person with whom you are shaking hands is also comfortable. Because number of times when you are not comfortable, then you may give a dead fish shake hand kind of a thing, which is a kind of shake hand wherein you show that you're not interested in shaking hands, which may send wrong messages. Invading someone's space is something that is a part of non-verbal communication. So when we are interacting or when we are talking, it is very important, and we have to be conscious of that how much closer we have to be to the person with whom we are communicating. So there is a science of proxemics. Once you, if you are interested in that, you may read through. There are a lot of books available. There are a lot of literature available on net. So the science of proxemics talks very clearly about our spaces that we need to be very sure of. And while talking, while expressing, there can be certain kind of sounds that we make, for example laughing sound, or hmm, ha, hmm. So when we make these kind of sounds, that is also giving some kind of this is giving some kind of expression that you are interested in listening. And the way we talk, the way we stress on words, words. So, pausing, stressing on the words, intonation, pitch at which we are talking plays a significant role. कई बार ऐसा होता है कि when you say something and the person says that you don't have to be rude, and then you realize, oh, was I rude? Because you may not be rude, but the sounds came out or the words came out in such a manner that the other person felt that it was rude. Zainab, do I have time? I have two more things to talk about. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Please go
So,
ahead. Please go ahead, ma'am.
yes, thank you. Thank you, Zainab. So, just two more important things, which is a basis for intrapersonal communication. Now, intrapersonal communication is the base for our communication. You may call it as self talk, you may call it as silent talk, you may call it as verbalization, self conversation. So, this self talk makes the basis for the communication. So, whatever you communicate to yourself, the way you have your internal communication, the words come out in the same manner. For example, if you have been talking about that you will not be able to do so, not only communication, it also impacts our behavior. So if I have been talking about to myself, oh, how am I going to do that? Oh, this is so difficult. This the person is so rude. I can't take that person. I have to interact with that person. So if you have been saying this thing to yourself, and when you have to actually communicate, the words may come out wrong at that point in time, or you may not be confident of how the communication has to go. So please watch your internal dialogue, because that internal dialogue is going to make the way for your further communication. Last slide is about hearing and listening. No communication gets completed without listening. A quick difference between hearing and listening is hearing is more accidental, involuntary, effortless. For example, right now it is raining in Vadodara and there is a lot of sound going on outside. Even if I don't want to hear that, I have to hear it, but I am not giving any conscious effort to listen that how loud is the sound, how loud is the sound. It is accident, but listening is more focused, more voluntary, and more intentional. Interestingly, God has given us 2 years and 1 month to speak less and listen, but because we are blessed by the speech, we speak more and listen less, which becomes a barrier to our listening. When we go and meet new people in a get together, when someone when someone introduces himself, hello, I'm Priyanka Behrani. At that point in time, I may not hear, I may not listen to the name carefully because I am preparing my turn to speak. So, number of times these things becomes the barrier to listening. And we hear what we want to listen. We listen what we want to listen. And number of times if the speaker is not very effective, we may miss out on sorry number of times if the speaker is not very effective, we may miss out on something that is really important because the person was not interesting. The sound, the pitch at which the person was speaking was low. So maybe I missed out something very important because the information person was giving was too much. So I felt boring. So I missed out on something important. Listening will never, no communication gets completed without the effective listening. So that's a small introduction that I talked about.
Thank you so much, Dr. Priya. That was a very interesting and very informative session. and I hope my audience have gained a lot from this, because I did. Very important and very small things we have to take care of when we are into communication with someone. uh, the thing you said in the last, that listening is the vital part of any communication. Until you listen to anybody, you won't be able to answer them. That is the most important thing. And as you talked about different forms of languages, body language, para language, and verbal and written languages, so these all go hand in hand, and they all combine together, create a good communication process. So as you are teaching these your students who are old enough, and they'll be in the field to do their jobs in a year or two, so do you give them some points to do hold some kind of communication, or do they learn with your behavior, ma'am, only because you are a psychologist also, you must be portraying it in your behavior also?
No, not really. Of course, we train them on the communication skills. And of course, they might be learning a lot of things from the teachers also through observational learning. But yes, we give them a lot of training related to how they need to communicate. We give them practice sessions. And of course, because they are going to appear for the interview, we train them how to sit even, how to talk, what kinds of words to use, how to understand the body language, how to use which words to use at what point in time. So we give them those kind of specific trainings, and we also have a lot of sessions wherein they need to practice it here in front of us.
So, ma'am, like this, you give them training, but what is your take on the thing that like communication skills can be taught to the student from the very beginning when they are into kindergarten, or is it good to train them when they come to the college? So if we give this training from the very beginning, will it not be easy for them also and for the teachers also? Is it like
Yeah, Dr. Zainab, a very, very, very important question. And the very important point that you brought up is that communication is not something that can be taught only at the later stage. Communication is one thing that is there within the early years of life. And that is why even CBSE or UNICEF, they have made life skills as very important part. So communication is supposed to be a life skill. They need to communicate. Even the smallest of the child, this I give example everywhere, that even the smallest of the child, when the child is born and when the child is hungry, the child has to cry to express ki mama, I'm hungry. So from there, the communication starts. And the way it is communicated, so when the child is small, child cries, it gives a direct message to the mother that yes, there is some need of the child. Similarly, as the children grow, if we make the vocabulary for the children very clear, if we make them understand things in a right manner, spend some time with them as parents, as teachers, developing the vocabulary, because most of the times it is seen, whichever may be the language, even the mother tongue, whichever may be the language, if children are thorough with the vocabulary, they will be able to express themselves more effectively. So that is there right from the early childhood. And listening skills, body language, those all things can be consciously taught to the children from the younger age.
very truly said, because I have a toddler, and I am like trying to train her, and at times I think, am I doing the correct thing or not, when I tell her to sit properly, to greet people around her, and when she's talking to some stranger, her the volume of her voice just diminishes. She's so low on the volume when she's talking to someone else, and when in the house, she's talking on the top of her volume. So I gradually tell her that you have to be
Yeah.
loud enough that the other person hears you, and you have to be very clear when you are telling your name, even when you are telling the name of your school. So I guess
Yeah, so
I'm
yes, so a few things that you said is that wherein that is the way we have to inculcate confidence in the children, because number of times the children or the students or whosoever has good communication skills. But only difficulty is related to self-esteem, because it was just half an hour, but all these things become the part of communication, developing communication skill. Because when the students or the professional have low self-esteem, that is where the self-confidence goes low. And even if they are very thorough with the communication, even if they are thorough with the message, they are not able to put across. And even at professionals, because I conduct employee training, so there also we have seen this thing, that they are not confident enough to express that something is wrong or something has to be changed, or they are not able to voice out their opinions.
Yes, ma'am. So, ma'am, would you like to say anything else?
No, I am done for the day. Yeah, but one thing with the last concluding thing, if I would love to say, is that you have to be very cautious about who is the other person with whom we are communicating. So if I'm talking to a child, I have to be clear. If I'm talking to the, I'm sure everybody thinks कि ये तो बहुत ही understanding वाली बात है, इसमें बताने वाली क्या बात है. But फिर भी when we are communicating, we number of times skip out that, which place we are in, who is the audience, is something that we have to be very careful about while communicating. And of course, the internal dialogue that I talked about, being a psychologist, I have to say that watch your internal dialogue.
Yes, ma'am. Truly, that if we are like at peace with ourselves, we'll be at peace with other people around us, and we'll be able to communicate ourselves to them. So, with this, we come to an end of our session. I would like to thank you, ma'am, and thank my dear audience who have been through with us. And they can post their questions if they have at all in the comment section. And Dr. Priya will definitely answer them as and when she gets time to answer your questions. Now we come to an end of our session. Thank you so much and have a lovely evening. Bye bye. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.